now we come to our next panel. The next panel is titled The Implications of the Truce in Yemen. What does the future hold? This panel is organized by the Washington Center for the Yemeni Studies, and the discussion will be moderated by Ms. Fatima Abu Alasrar. Ms. Fatima, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for being here. It's a pleasure. Thank you for that was a very important update on the truce that we just heard from Ambassador from Mr. Tim Lenderking. And today we will be joined by two important speakers, and I think. They don't need introduction. I don't have the bios in front of me, but they don't need introductions. We know them very well. Mr. Khaled Alyemani, who is Khaled Alyemani. He was a career diplomat and a former member of. I'm sorry, just a second. It's not there, but I remember it. So he's a career diplomat and a former Yemen's foreign minister, and has served long, was a former colleague as well, served long in the foreign ministry, and currently a non-resident scholar at the Atlantic Council. And we also have with us Mr. Nourman Roule, who has been, thank you, who also has an incredible career in the Central Intelligence Agency and an expert on Yemen and the Gulf. So their bios are attached with you in your booklets. So without further ado, I would like to welcome them, as well as Mr. Timothy Lenderking, to the stage. Just a reminder, we'll be just having a friendly conversation right now. You can write your questions. I'm just going to encourage you. We have incredible wealth here. Like, these are policymakers who are working on Yemen. Would encourage you to stay within Yemen, to stay within the truce, and think about ways where, how can we benefit from this expertise, to think about how we get out of this stalemate and deadlock that we have in Yemen. So if you could frame it in a question rather than an open-ended statement, I'll appreciate that. So, good. So, 8 years of war in Yemen. September 21st, we saw these celebrations from the Houthi militia, Ansar Allah, on, their takeover of Yemen, or their so-called revolution. We've seen military parades to celebrate that. And a few days later, on September 26th, we see another military parade by the Yemeni government, whereby, it was the 60th anniversary of Yemen's revolution against the Zaydi imamate that was toppled 60 years ago. Different factions, different ideologies. Yemen is becoming more complicated. I don't think we have one Yemeni. We have multiple Yemenis, multiple identities, and we recognize that. We realize also, after 8 years, no military solution is feasible. It's not decidedly so, because of all of the dynamics we heard about throughout the day and in the former panel. Political solution is also, thorny, as we just heard. We move one step forward, two steps back, and it's just a continuous negotiation process. So, in light of the fact that the truce is coming up for renewal, there is interest from the U.S. government on a political settlement. And so I'm going to probably start with Mr. Khaled Alyemani, on the issue of the political settlement in Yemen, and negotiating with the Houthis. And we just talked about it, that we believe that, we can't just say that we can't really negotiate with them and just, keep upholding, same principles that we held of the national dialogue, etc. Want to hear from you, the path forward. How can we really break through from this truce to something a little bit more solid and durable?
Thank you, Fatima. And I'm very happy to be. So how can I be? Thank you, Fatima, and I'm very happy to be with my brothers and sisters and with so many friendly faces. And sitting the stage for the first time to establish these annual meetings. It's something very important for all of us. Creating a momentum of Yemeni platform in Washington, D.C. is very important. And as we are talking, and I was just following the news, I want just to express all our solidarity with the people in Miami as they are facing all this difficult situation with the flooding and the aftermath of the tropical storm Ian. I think Tim just mentioned very important elements on the process that we are living in Yemen today. All Yemenis are focusing on these remaining 3 days. We are focusing on Monday to see the renewal of the truce. The truce is everything we have now as instrument of establishing durable peace in Yemen. We need to break the cycle of violence, and by breaking the cycle of violence, then we sit together and Tim mentioned what's happening when we started to establish this by contact with the Houthis. We will keep shouting, but one moment we will start to listen to each other. And this was the history of Yemen. We fought in the 60s, and we were during nighttime having meetings and jointly to talk about our future. And that's why I was telling Fatima that I think PLC, it's time for PLC to start contacting the Houthis and talking to the Houthis and talking issues of Yemenis. And this will lessen the impact of regional influence and will help Yemenis to come together. And Tim mentioned that, and I think it's very important to build upon it. I'm having some remnants of...
Would you like some water?
Yeah.
Here, I'll get you water.
So now, if we see what's really what's the result of the truce, 6 months of truce, see a huge difference. Tim mentioned what's the reflection of truce on the living conditions of the population. He never mentioned the IDPs. There is a lot of improvement in their life. People, they are not moving like before. Last week we had a discussion with London, with the Yemeni, with the British Yemeni Society, and an expert from IOM just explained that the impact of the truce on IDPs. And it's very important to know that when the war stops, everything come in place. People settle down. People are not afraid anymore to go back to their life. And all the results on the movement of people from Sana'a airport, 25,000 people, the 4 times fuel coming to Hodeidah, comparing to last year, so many, and also the reduction of civilian casualties in the war. And But still, there is a phenomenon that we need to take into consideration, that there is a lot of flexing of muscles flexing. And it's logic, because you see the Houthis having all these parades in Hodeidah, in Sana'a, and also you see our military having in Marib these big shows. Warlords are pushing for more war. We have to stop this cycle of violence by not supporting, just applauding, we have more strength to continue this war. No, we have to stop this war. And to stop this war means to abandon the positions of strengthening this mentality of war and move towards having a new public statement to welcome peace, to work for peace, and to work to bring Yemen together. This idea is still very far from the mentality of both sides. And I was talking to government officers. They want peace, but they don't know how to talk peace. Public statement should change in order to face the new reality of moving from 7 years war-torn country to the hope towards the future of ending this war and establishing durable peace in Yemen. So the second issue also that I wanted to talk to you about is that the Houthis' mentality that they are not, they believe that the PLC is no match for them. They feel that they are bigger, they are stronger, they are more united. This concept is still very solid in their mentality, and they think that the only partner for them is the Saudis, right, the coalition. So they need to arrive into sort of arrangement for peace with the Saudis. But they will live in Yemen with the Yemenis, not with the Saudis. But they need to agree that those are their partners in the country. Those are that they need to agree to live, survive, and continue living together in this country. And the third point that I want also to bring, Houthis are afraid from peace. They're terrified by the idea that someone is dragging them into the peace ground. Because all they have, all they know is war. The war is their concept. The war is the only instrument they use to conquer others, to empower themselves. And also their partners, their regional partners, all they have is only drones, missiles, and drugs. And by them, if they move from the war zone to the peace zone, so then the Iranian contribution will be none. It will be zero, because Iran is not willing to pay billions for the reconstruction of Yemen. Iran will not be paying all these expenses, never even contributed to the humanitarian plan, UN humanitarian plan for Yemen, a penny. If you have any statistics of Iran contributing to Yemen, then I would be more than happy to discuss it. Before moving, I have some recommendations, and I was talking to Fatima about them. I think the first thing that we need, to see international support for this silent voice of Yemenis, the anti-war movement that is growing but still silent. We need to hear them. And the second issue that we need to see, PLC contacts with the Houthis. They need to look for the best mutually accepted venue for such a discussion. If they don't want to do it through the Office of the Special Envoy, they can do it in Amman, in Oman, they can do it anywhere. But they should agree on the basics of how to talk, and I would rather prefer to do it in Yemen. And when we were designing the Hodeidah plan, we were having all these dreams, and I think Tim would remember. of bringing the international community, embassies to Hodeidah, and establish a platform in Hodeidah for peace. And we wanted to reestablish Yemen from Hodeidah. But then everybody turned their back to this plan. And we ended up saying that Khaled Alyemani was the responsible for the Stockholm, and he was the one who was shaking hands with Mohammed Abdul Salam, and he was the enemy of Yemenis. And for the UN, I think it's very important for the P5, the same that we have this powerful man next to us, and his contribution is very important. We need to see the P5 present with the special envoy in pushing things, because we have a momentum in Yemen, and this momentum should not be let go, because it's very important. Although the invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is impacting the Security Council consensus, but on Yemen still we have consensus in the Security Council, and we need to continue working and seizing this moment to push for Yemen, Yemeni peace. And
so
yes, one last comment. I think also we are missing something very important, that all the time we see the special envoy, the representative of the UN, the U.S. special envoy, they are always talking to the Houthis through Muscat. And I think that it's time to talk to the Houthis in Sana'a and get more international contacts with them, because this is how we rationalize the Houthi phenomena and bring them down to earth. And I will stop here for more discussion and question.
I'll get back to you on that, because I didn't understand your last point about going to Sana'a, but we can go there. But just one of the things that you're emphasizing on is, reaching out between the PLC and the Houthis, establishing a communication channel and talking about these issues. But then again, this leads me to my second question to Mr. Roule, is that how much of it that either the PLC or the Houthis really have their own decisions, and how much of it is really controlled by either Saudi Arabia or Iran on this matter, because there has been multiple instances. We see the PLC and the Saudis are aligned more or less because they have a common goal, which is restoring some type of government into power and pushing away the Houthis. But how are we going to deal with that? Again, sort of like, can we actually get into a political settlement with both Saudi Arabia and Iran involved in this conflict?
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with the Washington Center. I'd like to thank Fatima and Saif and Marwa for this opportunity, and I'd also like to acknowledge that it's a rare thing to see such legendary American diplomatic figures as Tim and Ellen and Jerry and Chris in the room at one time. There's a lot of great thinking, but I can't also help acknowledging that we have so many extraordinary Yemeni minds in the room, and we have probably more to learn from you than anything certainly I could say. But if there's one person I'd like to acknowledge, especially in the room, it's 14-year-old Izzat, who represents tomorrow, and he is the reason that we all need to work harder to take care of his future, and so he can fix our mistakes. So I think if you're looking at the region, it's impossible to imagine a solution within Yemen that does not have some sort of condition in which the Saudis and other Gulf players and Iran are either engaged appropriately or withdrawn from the political dynamic. Certainly within Saudi Arabia, I agree with Tim's comments. They're looking for stability within Yemen. They're looking for an end to a conflict. They're looking for an end to hundreds of drones and missiles fired on their civilian centers. The Houthis exclusively or almost exclusively target mass casualty sites in Saudi Arabia. That's a typical modus operandi of Iranian militias. They use mass casualty weapons against mass casualty civilian targets and energy targets. And for the Saudis, there's no question in my mind, having spoken recently to the senior-most Saudi leadership, that were the ceasefire to end and the missiles and drones to continue, that they would do what we would do in the United States if we had hundreds of drones and missiles fired from a neighboring country on our cities, and that is respond militarily, using the protocols that Chris spoke to minimize civilian casualties. Iran is going to be a bigger challenge. For Iran, there is not a single strategic reason that it should cooperate with the peace process. For Iran, an opportunity to have a Lebanese Hezbollah-type actor on the Bab el-Mandab is an extraordinary gain. It allows them to control, along with the Strait of Hormuz, a vast portion of the world's floating oil. It allows them to control a vast portion of the world's trade. Literally, with those two choke points, which also give you the Suez, you have your thumb on the carotid artery of international trade and international economy. I think the United States has worked very hard to constrain Iran through maritime seizures of weapons, and our Navy, working with partners, has done a lot to keep those weapons out, to allow the political space for the Yemeni actors to do what they need to do. But this will be very difficult, and with respect to all of the international community involved, our efforts are insufficient to constrain Iran or to sufficiently deter Iran from believing that by encouraging the Houthis to have a maximalist position and by providing the Houthis with technologies for mass casualty attacks, that they will not be able to achieve their goals. I have one more point. If we don't do something about this, you've got a couple of bad situations that come forward. I've already mentioned the Saudis will defend their cities. I flew into Jeddah when a Houthi missile struck an oil facility just a few minutes before my plane landed. I saw that, and I tell you, that puts an edge on your analysis of a situation. Likewise, if you're looking at the Iranians being able to provide the Houthis with ballistic missiles capable of hitting Israel, as well as Jordan and Egypt and every other state, you're going to have a very difficult dynamic. So as terrible as the problem is right now, unless we're able to get the international community to constrain Iran, you're going to invite more Saudi defensive actions, and you're going to see a region that will be much more unstable.
Thank you so much. It seems like from what you're telling us is that there's almost really no incentive for Iran to change its behavior in Yemen, and that's quite problematic for the peace process because it ultimately ends up impacting the Houthis. So I heard from a former UN envoy, whom I shall not name, that basically, when the negotiators feel really, positive about a peace agreement or, a deal that's on the table, they often come back with a decisive decision. 3 days later, that is often negative. And that implies, greater coordination with their regional allies that doesn't necessarily benefit the peace on the ground. So I'd like to come back to you later with the question of leverage and where the U.S. can find leverage to help Yemenis in this process, because this is something that have come up in the former panel where there was a lot of questions about Iran. But maybe if I would bring it to the now and more precisely 3 days from now with the Truce extension, hey, is it going to be extended? And so that's on my mind. And then till when? And the other question is that there are a few measures that are here and there. Again, like TAS, fine, we haven't seen progress on that. The issue of civil servant salaries, which is going to take a long time to solve. Other issues of prisoners exchange, that is vital to both parties. So that's going to continue moving. But the there are fundamental issues that are not being addressed in the truce. We can't address child soldiers because that's too sensitive of a topic to address. We can't address issues of indoctrination and cultural change because that's too sensitive of a topic to address. And I recognize that the UN might have its limits. That's why political settlement is probably the only way forward, because then you get to discuss these hard topics. But I fear that the road to political settlement is long. And I have to agree with Mr. Khaled Alyemani, the longer that we wait in terms of getting to a political settlement or starting a negotiating on that front, the more difficult it is, to really find a breakthrough. So I need to ask you a question, and that question is, again, if there's, like how long is this truce is going to be extended for, and, what is being done to actually ensure that we get into a political settlement?
We're pushing for an extended and expanded truce, and that means that we want to see if we can get beyond the cycle of the 2-month sort of technical rollover. We've done that. I'm very glad that has been achieved, but ultimately, I think we all want to move to the next level, right? To the move to the next step, which gets us into a durable ceasefire. So moving beyond the truce into a ceasefire and have the mechanisms that go with a ceasefire, like an operations center where military representatives from both sides can sit together and deal with the inevitable violations that take place, where we can have more meetings across parties, as I mentioned, happened in the military commission last couple of months. It's hard for me to understand why any Yemeni party wouldn't go forward with this, because even if one argues that the truce is behind schedule, there weren't enough flights, as spelled out in April. There's supposed to be 2 flights a month, and there's supposed to be 18 fuel ships, and maybe we are behind schedule. But also, everybody needs to understand that many other countries are involved. If we're going to do commercial flights, then the Egyptian government has to be consulted on this matter. And they have their own sovereignty issues and their own right to say that we have some security concerns. We've been talking to numerous other governments in the last several, let's say 2 months, also in New York and at different levels, to really see what we could do in terms of supporting the UN effort to expand destinations. That's what we want. That may be a Houthi demand too, but that's a U.S. demand. We want to see that, normalcy starts to return to Yemen. And you could measure it in different categories. We're talking about, let's not have Yemenis have to queue for 48 hours to fill up their gas tank in Sana'a. That is a hardship. Let's not have humanitarian access obstructed because the trucks that deliver goods don't have petrol. So moving fuel into the market is a basic thing the United States wants to see. Taiz Road, I mentioned, we do believe there's no justification for continuing a blockade on Taiz, nor on any other city. So let's move to the point at which these things can be negotiated. Prisoner releases, you mentioned. Things like child soldiers can begin to emerge through the negotiation process. The indoctrination issues, which I know many Yemenis feel very strongly about. The summer camps that we read about, that we see on social media, the hatred and the intolerance that is preached and indoctrinated in some of these, some of these camps. My sense of, talking to Yemenis inside Yemen and outside is that's not Yemen. And that's not the kind of future that Yemenis want to see. So I think these things can be approached. And we're simply saying the vehicle is the best chance to do that. Why? Because it's already established. The truce is the best vehicle to do that. It's established. It's delivering results. And it's something that we can build on. So our focus is getting through Sunday, not having any more cross-border attacks, minimizing the skirmishes and the attacks that have taken place inside Yemen as well. And that's done, I think, by incentivizing Yemenis also to put pressure on their leadership. There's no going back. Hey, leaders, there's no going back to what we had before April 2nd. We're not going to go back to, this kind of bloodshed. We're not going to go back to trying to decide the fate of Marib on the battlefield. That has been tried. It has not succeeded. So there should be no illusion that somehow the battlefield is going to bring more benefits or more concessions from the other side. It's not going to. It's going to harden positions. And before you know it, we'll get into what Norm is talking about. You'll have a regional conflagration, and it's going to be worse than what we've seen over the last 2 years. And the United States does not want to see that. So our full commitment is to push forward, enlist regional partners. It is great. It is very important that when I talk to a Chinese or a Russian diplomat, they see Yemen largely the same. There is no military solution. That's what Moscow believes. That's what Beijing believes. I don't take that for granted. I think that's something that we have to continue to manage and encourage. But to me, that's important. The unity that we see on the Security Council with countries from all over the world represented, they can come together and they can condemn attacks where they need to be condemned. They can support a political process. That's why I say that we have never seen the world community united as it is today. And again, when faced with numerous other crises, when the world can focus on Yemen, it can help the process that we're all trying to achieve.
That makes sense. But there's a question that in my mind, and I think a lot of people are asking for, anyone can answer this, but I think maybe Tim. There are no consequences for the party who violates, and that is problematic. And the 4 questions that I just got from the audience is kind of echoed something I had in my mind. Is that, how are you holding, or how could they be held accountable? What kind of mechanism can be put forth to hold violating party accountable? And I think majority of people here probably have someone back home in Taiz, and that's what's on their mind, is that, they see flights, commercial flights going out from Sana'a, to Cairo, to Amman, but people cannot visit, their family in their country that are just 10 minutes away from them. It has to be a 6-hour drive. So the issue of accountability and, is critical. I can see how it would hamper the peace process by saying we won't engage unless you do this. So it's a very difficult thing to do. I'm going to assume that there's no progress in Taiz. Am I right?
Well, I think there's more, I think people know where Taiz is now. I think a lot of people didn't know what or where it was. They know now. And I think there's been a lot of international attention. We'd love to see humanitarian workers, the press, go into Taiz and report more on the situation to bring it home on our TV screens, and so we can talk to people who are in Taiz, understand the direct impact of the situation that they are facing, and understand how they think it can be resolved. So there hasn't been a road opened yet. We need to see that, and that is a core U.S. Demand of the Houthis. And let's bear in mind that if the Houthis choose to return to war on October 3rd or 10th or 17th, despite the benefits of the truce that they themselves have asked for, that they themselves have wanted to see, and that we all agree need to be expanded, they will be completely isolated, and that will destroy any sort of hope for legitimacy that the Houthis have tried to achieve. They want to talk about their desire to lead Yemen or that they represent Yemenis. But I don't think, Yemenis, are going to choose going back to war on October 3rd or any point going forward. So we need to drive this process ahead and build on it. And that's why I say the terms of the truce that we've seen, those benefits, tangible benefits to the Yemeni people, and that includes Ties Road. We are going to get there. But that's where we need to go and put our emphasis.
Thank you. I'm moving to audience questions that are interesting, and I think this one is for Mr. Alyemani. It says, Houthis were defeated in the south, in Tahama, in Ma'rib, and lately in Shabwa. Why do we keep hearing that they are too strong to be defeated? And I think sort of like just in general, in terms of reaching out to a political agreement with them, I think there are still voices in Yemen that think that given the lack of progress on both fronts, why don't you favor a military solution yet still?
Yeah, this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's the warlords terminology. We think we still can't defeat them. What I call it the war of centimeters that will continue for 100 years. So they keep saying that they will take this village and the Houthis will take this village, and this war will continue for centuries. We need to stop that. And let me just, if you allow me to say that the truce will be extended. The truce will be extended. But now the Houthis are playing with the concept. They are trying to use all the leverage that truce is offering them in the political sense. We push hard, all Yemenis push hard, the international community, the special envoy, the UN special envoy, they are all pushing for 6 months minimum, because in 6 months we can do so many things. How can we discuss the issue of paying salaries, for example? Paying salaries is not an easy issue. We started this process in Stockholm and before. And you need to bring the payrolls list, and you need to clean the payroll list in both sides, because in both sides there is a lot of names. We need to clean that list. It's a huge list, and we need to know. For example, if I'm talking about in the special account at the central bank in Hodeidah, when the Houthis decided to take that account, there were around 39 to 40 billion Yemeni riyals. So are they going to contribute to bring that 40 billion to the table so that we have enough money to pay salaries? If we count, for example, from January till August, Hodeidah received 48 cargo shipments of oil and derivative. And this means that the revenues for state from that is 150 billion Yemeni riyals. We need to talk the numbers exactly so that we know. Houthis insist, no, the government should pay the salaries. Mm-hmm. We need to talk these real things, but we need to come into this extended truce so that we have time to talk. We have time to sit. We have time to bring all this information together and try to digest it all together and understand that international community is not going to pay our salaries. We need to find the way to get that money paid to the people, to the public servants. And if we need some support, additional support, then the international community will come with that additional amount. But we need to find out how to get that. For example, when you talked about the state revenues, where are they? We need to know that with these state revenues, we can pay them the salaries that were stopped from 2014, 2015. Another issue that we need to discuss when we have an expanded truce, not only the child soldiers and others, so many. Every time we have more extended period, we can sit together, we can bring every topic. We can bring every topic to the table of discussion. But in these 2 months, it's like putting you under pressure that this truce is ending next week. So you can't really materialize any of your dreams of transforming this cessation of hostilities into a permanent, transforming this truce into a permanent cessation of hostilities. And this is very important. And you know, you ask a question very interesting about the legal framework of how can we judge the Houthis. This is not the time, because in international law, the truce period, the actions of the parties during the truce period, if you read this concept, it's really very difficult to judge, because parties will, and I mentioned that parties are using, resorting to military operations during the truce. And they know that this is how the warlords pushing to reinvigorate the war, to go back into the difficult moment of grabbing the entire society onto their ground. And Tim was mentioning here, we need to abandon that situation and move toward peace. For us to move toward peace, it's not enough that the international community pressures the Houthis. Our voices also should keep more pressure on all parties that the only way for us to continue and to achieve peace in Yemen and to continue down the path of truce and transforming that truce into cessation of hostilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled. A lot of questions, again, have come up on kind of like just the role of the regional intervention, and this time bringing Russia in. So if I understand correctly, the person is asking if Russia via Iran could exploit the situation in Yemen by undermining efforts. I don't think it's, I mean, anyway, so by undermining basically effort to the peace process through pressuring the Gulf. So, and then the other questions are on, do you see a correlation between the Iranian nuclear negotiation and the current truce in Yemen? And do you think Iran nuclear deal will, or may lead to a reasonable solution in Yemen? And this is, I guess, in light of the war in Ukraine, so this person feels that the Houthis are maybe blackmailing the world by raising their demands. Otherwise, they always resort to attack oil resources in Saudi Arabia, and they use that basically as a tactic to negotiate from a better position. So I think these questions are kind of connected.
I'll handle just a couple of those and pass the easier ones on to the minister and Tim to resolve. Or the harder ones, as we all know they'll end up being.
I just lump some in.
I'd like to begin with just a comment on the truce, though. The truce allows a number of civilian aid projects that are so critical to the Yemeni people to continue, and demining plays an important role in this. An international program, I think it's called Masama or Masam. It's a critical program that has removed hundreds of thousands of mines, to include in Houthi territory. And this is saving the lives of Yemeni civilians every day, and it involves people from many different countries, and God bless the people who are involved with that. And there are also hospitals that have been opened by the Arab coalition and by the international community in a number of areas, and those are important as well. So this truce enables all of these critical projects to continue, and I think more attention should be paid to some good things that are happening out there with the international community, because that helps the international community to better understand why they should support this. When it comes to Iran and Russia in Yemen, I don't see much reason for Russia to oppose the extension of the truce, for Russia to impose an extension of the fine diplomacy that Tim, the minister, and others have led. But Russia has significant interests in the region. Russia is establishing a nuclear submarine base in the Red Sea for the first time, with 4 berths for 4 nuclear submarines that will enable it to maintain submarines in the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, et cetera, et cetera. And you have the Chinese and a lot of other countries in Djibouti. So there are great power interests in this area. But on the truce itself, I think Russia wants to see peace in the region for its own interest as well as others. But again, moving to Iran, if you are Iran, you want a powerful voice on the Bab el-Mandab. And looking at a situation where you have a Lebanese Hezbollah type situation where your actors have heavy weapons, have the predominance of weapons, are able to pressure the legitimate government, and the international community handles the aid and engagement issues on civilian issues. So Iran only pays for missiles. The international community works with the legitimate Yemeni government to handle civilian structures. I think that's an ultimate Iranian goal, and I think if they could get that, they would support a political solution much more quickly. And I think on the issues on the other topics, I will pass this on to my colleagues at the
yeah, I think you covered it, and we covered it also in the earlier panel. But this is a good question on food security, and I think it's pertinent because the sources of the conflict in Yemen are usually the core conflict issues are distribution of political power, and then the other is, distribution of public services. And with the food security issue or insecurity, it is quite important because during the national dialogue process in 2013, where everyone was celebrating a good mechanism that brings Yemenis together and hopefully end the conflict, people were hungry. And nobody paid attention to the economic situation. So much money was poured into the political process and not so much into the economic process. And the question here asks us, in terms of combating food insecurity, potential famine, what exactly is the international community doing? And what is the ideal solution? What type of instruments that could be used. I know the United States and the international community are looking not just on temporary solutions or just humanitarian aid here and there, but sort of an economic solution also going hand in hand with the current conflict. So. Sorry? That's your question, I guess. Good. So also within the global context of the food crisis, how can we address this issue?
There's no doubt that the Russian invasion of Ukraine puts strains in so many different directions on the world economy, on Ukraine's ability to export. There was a great deal. This is one of the big themes of the UN General Assembly last week. There were multiple meetings and engagements. Many leaders met to discuss this, find solutions in small groups and big groups. It was a major theme in many of the heads of states who spoke at the UN General Assembly. And it's also shown a light on the vulnerability in Yemen, because Yemen is a food insecure nation, unfortunately. I think we're all working to change that. And as I said earlier, the humanitarian supplies that are coming in can in no way address this problem in any sort of sustained fashion. So that's again why I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on the economic capacity of Yemen, and we need to look at ways that Yemen's food security will be improved. The ports need to remain open for imports, which is where most of Yemen's food supply comes in. It's a good thing that last week there was an event on the Safar tanker. If the Safar tanker leaks all that oil, 1.1 million barrels, that's bad for Yemen's fishing industry, for its ports. That will be bad for global commerce in the Red Sea. So thank goodness many countries came forward. The Yemeni Shipping Company, as well, was the first private sector donor for the Safar tanker. Now it's on the UN to take those pledges and get the money, get the oil off the Safar and onto a more secure vessel. I think there are all sorts of interweaving pieces here that need to be address, but I do think there's more and more recognition of Yemen's precarious food situation. It was already a country on the verge of famine by most indicators. And you have a huge champion in the World Food Program's director, David Beasley, is constantly looking for solutions, trying to preserve food for Yemen when the demands in Afghanistan, Tigray, and elsewhere are also very significant. And that's also our job, is to keep, as I said at the beginning, amidst all of the global crises, to keep the attention on Yemen so that donors and economic actors can stay very focused on Yemen's needs.
Great. Thank you so much. We're nearing the end of the session. Yes, how about I give everybody 1 minute, starting with you. Thank you.
I want just, on behalf of all Yemenis, really, to express how Yemenis are really appreciative of the U.S. efforts and this administration's efforts, especially. Yemen is in one of the priorities of this administration, and we see the White House engaging all the time. We see all these President Biden's statements and the contribution of the special envoy, and we really will. I think we will have this chapter of history in the teaching of our students in the future. Also, as we are talking about the efforts to end this war, we need also to praise the indirect talks that the Saudis are taking with the Houthis. And I think they are very important. They are discussing issues of border security, issues of governance, and other issues that will be, for my consideration, paramount for the future of peace. And peace is not an easy, and I wrote a lot about it. And I think that just if we step out from the war zone to the peace efforts, it will be very difficult, very harsh, but much better than killing each other and reducing the number, as Tim said in the beginning, from the civilian casualties from 60%, by 60% to 0. And this will be the best celebration in the history of Yemen.
Thank you. Earlier in a different panel, the issue of the Red Sea came up in terms of what was discussed at a UN meeting. And it was noted that some members of the meeting talked about the economic growth and their ambitions for development of the Red Sea Basin. And others, particularly associated with Yemen, talked about the near famine issues, the war issues, the reasons to handle the Houthi issues. I think we need to make sure that our bar is as high as possible on Yemen. The social, economic, technological, and cultural developments in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates will have positive spillover for the region throughout the Red Sea Basin. There's no reason Yemen should not be a full participant in both building on that and benefiting from that for the Yemeni people. Your aspiration should be no different than that of your neighbors. And the international community owes you the chance to develop those relationships. But unless we are able to constrain malign actors, and I tend to beat on this drum, but it's what I've done for many years, unless we're able to come up with a meaningful program to constrain Iran's involvement in Yemen, then you do risk a Lebanon-like situation. And this condemns Lebanon to generations of malaise, of economic hardship, and of violence. And I don't see the international community doing what it needs to do yet to keep Iran from meddling in a country where it has no strategic or national interest. Thanks to the Washington Center and to all of you present. God bless you all.
Whatever happens on Sunday, October 2nd, we drive forward. We drive forward, and the U.S., stays in the game. I'm counting on the truce being extended, and that doesn't mean we rest or we take it easy. It means we keep building and we keep driving on the momentum that has been achieved. there is a role for Yemeni Americans, for all of you, to play in keeping that momentum going and signaling to Yemenis back home that there is hope, there is commitment, not just from us, but from other international actors. There is some flexibility, I think, that's being demonstrated by regional countries. There's commitment from Oman, I think, in Saudi Arabia, to see this conflict ended. And I think that's extremely important. I mentioned Jordan earlier for the great job that they're doing with Yemeni flights. We got to expand it. There has to be more. So rest assured, please, that the president wants to see this conflict ended. And that means, and we're not there yet. Peace, a truce, as I've said, does not mean peace in Yemen. Too many casualties still, too many undecided issues, and lots of potential to address really difficult problems. If we could get through next week and and continue to build, then we can see the outlines, I think, of a new Yemen start to emerge. And so I remain incredibly grateful to all of you for your support, for you gentlemen as well for what you do, and special thanks to the Washington Center for hosting us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Please join me in thanking this excellent panel. Appreciate it. Thank you.